Can you imagine waiting all day with your heart pounding with hope for your daughter to call you on your birthday? And when the phone finally rings, it is not to wish you a happy birthday, but to ask you for money. That is what happened to me. On the day I needed affection the most, I was met with a painful truth. For my own daughter, I was more of an ATM than a mother. But what she never imagined is that this wound would become my strength. Today, I am going to tell you how that moment changed my life, how I learned to set boundaries and recover my dignity. Stay until the end because what I lived through could also be your story. Before we start, subscribe right now and hit the notification bell because here we share real stories that can open your eyes and give you back the strength you thought was lost. Today, I woke up with my heart awake before my body, as if my years knew the date better than the calendar. I put on a pot of coffee and laid out the good tablecloth, the one I keep for visitors who almost never arrive anymore. My cell phone rested on the table like a silent little bird, without vibrating, without light. I took a deep breath and told myself, "Calm down, Helen. It is still early." At 63 years old, I do not lack anything material, but there are holes that savings cannot fill. I opened the window and the neighborhood sun came in warm and even, just like every other day. Today I wanted it to be different, just a mom happy birthday, and yet the house sounded like a new kind of silence, the kind that weighs you down. I poured myself some coffee and counted spoonfuls of sugar as if they were memories. Before, my living room used to be filled with laughter, with improvised flowers, with hugs that smelled like family. Now it is just me and my complete china, set the one I bought with pleasure, because I can and because I deserve it. I have my accounts in order, my bills paid up to date, my independence without debts, but loneliness does not understand bank statements. I looked at the clock and looked at the cell phone again. Nothing yet. Surely Valerie is busy. She will call later. I told myself so I would not feel the pain. I put on earrings, I combed my hair calmly, as if I were preparing for a visit that perhaps would not come. Valerie, my girl with the luminous name, always in a rush, with her perfect agenda. The world grows and gestures shrink, I think, but I bite my tongue. I bought a small vanilla cake, just in case she showed up in a hurry and without time. I left it in the fridge next to a bottle of wine that I almost never open. I am not a needy mother, that is not my story. I have my own things, I made them myself. But sometimes, dignity also wants a simple hug. I started arranging the cushions as if straightening fabrics could straighten thoughts. The silence was still there, sitting next to me, very comfortable. I looked at the framed photo of Valerie's graduation, and my eyes burned. That day, I sold a ring to pay for the dress and the makeup she wanted. It did not weigh on me. A mother does the math with her heart. I also remembered the down payment on her car, the deposit for her apartment, the unexpected expenses. I am not a martyr. I do not play that game. I did it because I could and because I wanted to. But today, I just wanted a call with my name spoken slowly. I squeezed the cell phone between my hands, warm, useless. Every minute without sound was a soft, repeated blow. I went to the kitchen and cut a tiny slice of the cake in case someone arrived and found me celebrating. I laughed softly at my own sad joke. I lit a little candle and thought about making a childhood wish, one of those impossible ones, that the house would fill up again, that my voice would not tremble with the obvious. "Happy birthday, Helen," I said to myself in front of the mirror, and it sounded hollow. Then finally, the cell phone vibrated as if waking up suddenly. My heart jumped before my hands did. I answered with a prepared smile, ready to forgive the delay. "Mom, are you there?" said Valerie's voice, rushed with the echo of the street. "Yes, honey," I replied, arranging my joy like someone arranging flowers. I waited for the happy birthday, the small one, the basic one. It did not arrive. In its place came a list destination hotel dates promotions. She talked to me about the honeymoon, about how beautiful it would be, about how little time was left. She said, "You know that only you can help me, like someone opening a door that is already familiar." I remained silent with the smile still on, but now without shine. "I would need you to support me with the payment today if possible, because the offer is ending," she finished. I watched the candle consuming itself in the dining room, a thin thread of smoke rising slowly. Today, I repeated softly in case I had heard wrong. Yes, today, Mom, can you? You are the only one with financial stability, she told me with technical affection. She explained numbers to me. She spoke about what was fair, about you have always backed us up. I nodded, even though she could not see a useless gesture in the air. A knot formed in my throat that was not about money, and even so, my first reaction was to think, of course I can. I can because I do not lack anything, because I managed my money, because I worked well. I can because that is what mothers are for. I tell myself, like an inherited phrase, I can, but how curious that today she did call, I thought in a low voice. Do you know what day it is today, honey? I asked, soft, more curious than hurt. There was a minimal silence on the other end, one of those that do not weigh heavy. Oh yes, I know I will call you properly later, okay. It is just that I am swamped, she said on the fly. And she went back to the hotel list, to the breakfast included, to the perfect dream. I looked at my tablecloth and felt that the coffee had gone cold without realizing it. I found myself thinking about transfers, about screenshots, about solving things. My hands were trembling, not because of the amount, but because of the way. I will make the transfer in the afternoon, I said, buying myself time with my own voice. She breathed a sigh of relief, as if she had just hung a heavy bag on my shoulders. I knew I could count on you, Mom, and she blew a kiss to the phone that sounded distant. I will call you later to check the details, she promised, scatterbrained without stopping. I did not know what to answer that would not hurt. I nodded to the air again and hung up slowly, as if prolonging the gesture would change something. The house returned to its silence, but it was no longer the same. Now it smelled like a party blackout, like a candle without a song. I stood looking at the cake as if it were an uncomfortable witness. I thought about writing her a message reminding her of the day. Then I deleted it. I did not want to sound needy. I did not want to sound like a complaint. How strange that a mother has to choose between her dignity and a hug, I thought. I opened the window again. The sun was still the same. I was not. The question installed itself in the living room. What am I really paying for? I went to the bedroom and took out the notebook where I write down my tasks. Between medical appointments and grocery lists, I wrote Transfer Valerie Hotel. My handwriting came out straight, as if nothing were shaking. I put the notebook away and sat on the edge of the bed, my feet dangling. I do not lack resources, I lack gestures, I said without sound. My mother came to my mind, her brown hands, her way of looking at me when she set boundaries. Affection is not blind obedience, she would have told me, and I felt that something very small but alive was moving inside me. I went back to the dining room and poured myself another cup, this time without sugar. I wanted to taste the bitterness to see if it woke me up to somewhere else. I ran my finger along the edge of the plate, an old habit, and smiled without wanting to. I did not want to fight, not today, not with myself. But the words, "What is fair?" stayed stuck to the wall. Fair, I thought, would be remembering me on my day without a shopping list. Fair would be a hug, and then we talk about numbers. And I discovered myself tired, not of the expense, but of the form. A message sounded a bank promotion, ironies of the universe. Another message, my neighbor Linda. My friend, come over in the afternoon, I will sing happy birthday to you. I sent her a heart and a thank you, beautiful, and I felt seen by someone. I looked at the time Valerie would not call again. Soon I know her. I saw myself from the outside, a groomed woman with her pretty house and her cake in slices. Not poor, not a victim, but broken in two. I thought about how easy it would be to say yes without thinking, and nevertheless, the little living thread inside asked me to wait. I opened the fridge, put the cake away, and poured myself cold water. The glass was sweating, and so was I, although the weather was mild. I spoke to myself softly, like to a child, do not be scared to feel. I am not going to dramatize, I told myself, and I laughed at the absurdity of that phrase in my empty house. The only thing I wanted was to belong to the day of my own birthday. Maybe later, maybe tomorrow, maybe with less haste. I leaned my forehead on the fridge door and breathed, counting to 10. The little thread inside me was no longer so small. I sat down with the notebook again, and underneath transfer, I wrote a question. How much does my peace cost? I looked at it for a long time as if the answer could write itself. It is not about the money, Helen, not today, I told myself, with a clarity I did not know. I have resources and I can help, but I also have the right not to feel used. Maybe this is not a fight. Maybe it is a conversation I have never had. The word conversation surprised me. It sounded less harsh than complaint. I closed the notebook like someone keeping a new secret, and I knew that the afternoon would not be the same as the morning. I looked at my outfit in the mirror, nice blouse, comfortable pants, shoes that do not hurt. I looked good, and I thought it, without shame, like a discreet truth. I took my keys and went down to the market for flowers. I wanted color in the dining room. The lady with the sunflowers said to me, "Congratulations, ma'am. May you have many more." I bought 2 bunches and felt my chest open a little bit. Sometimes it is enough for someone to look you in the eyes for you to remember who you are. I returned with the stems dripping water, and the house smelled new to me. I put on music softly, old ballads, the kind from before, and the afternoon settled in. I placed the sunflowers in a vase, and the living room changed its mood. I poured myself a glass of wine, a small one, and toasted with myself because, yes, Helen. I sat down to write 3 things to be grateful for an old habit I had forgotten. I wrote down health, my own roof strength. The 4th word stayed at the tip of the pencil boundaries. I was a little scared to write it, but my hand got ahead of me. Boundaries, I repeated, and the echo in the house sounded firm. Maybe I was finally going to learn to say them out loud. The cell phone vibrated again. It was Valerie, a short audio message. "Mom, I am sending you the link for the hotel. Thank you. I love you." I listened to the "I love you," and it pricked me sweetly, but it did not numb the pain. I opened the link and saw perfect photos of blue beaches and huge beds. I did not hate any of that. On the contrary, I was glad because life is also enjoyment. Only that today I wanted something else from my daughter. Presence. I stayed staring at the screen until the brightness went down by itself. Then, without rushing, I turned off the cell phone and let the house breathe with me. Something was changing, and it did not have to do with the amount. I did not make any final decision that afternoon, and that was also new for me. I decided to gift myself time like someone gifting themselves flowers. I walked through the house, touched the backrests, opened curtains, let the last sun come in. The cake returned to the table, and I cut another slice, this time bigger. "Happy birthday, Helen," I repeated, and it did not sound so hollow. I saved the tears for another day today. I wanted clarity. I'm not going to close this story with an automatic yes. Tomorrow when Valerie calls me, I will have something different to say. When I heard the phone ring that morning, I felt my heart give a jump, like in the old days when I expected good news. My hand trembled a little, not from age, but from accumulated hope. I thought finally it is her she remembered. She is going to sing happy birthday to me, even if it is in a rush. I fixed my hair quickly, as if she were going to see me through the screen. I answered with a cheerful voice, prepared to hear a happy birthday, Mommy. But instead of that, Valerie's rushed voice came in, run over by the noise of the street. "Mom, can you hear me? I need you to do me a big favor." I felt the hope slipping away like water through my fingers. At first, I did not understand well. I thought she was going to tell me to come to eat or to wait for her to cut a cake together. But she started talking about trips, about offers, about a hotel she had to pay for right now. I was breathing slowly, trying to order my thoughts. "Do you know what day it is today, daughter?" I dared to ask with a voice quieter than I wanted. There was a weird silence, as if she had not heard. Then she responded quickly. Yes, I know, but I need to solve this. Right now, it is important." Her tone did not carry tenderness, it carried urgency, and my heart, which was waiting for flowers, received invoices. While she talked about beaches and honeymoon packages, I saw my table set intact, waiting for company. The contrast hurt in my chest like a dry blow. "Can you support me, Mom? You are the only one who can do it without a problem," she insisted. Her words sounded true because I could, but inside me something murmured. And what do I do with what she did not give me? I wanted to interrupt her, tell her to give me a hug before anything else, even if it was with her voice. I did not do it. I swallowed the complaint like always, and I just said, "Let me think about it, honey." Valerie kept talking, detailing the hotel, the ocean view, the included breakfasts. I listened, but my mind traveled to another place, to my childhood, to my mother, to how she taught me that respect goes first. I remembered when we brought her a serenade, even though we did not have much money. It was the way of telling her, "Here we are with you." Now I, with everything resolved, without debts, without lack, awaited that same minimal gesture. "Is it that the promotion ends today, Mom? Will you help me?" she repeated. Her voice sounded sweet but not loving. I felt her in silence, swallowing the emptiness. The world around seemed to mock me, my uncut cake, my unlit candle, my sunflowers still fresh, everything ready for a celebration that did not exist. "Of course I can help you," I said finally with a knot in my throat. She sighed with relief, as if she had taken a weight off her shoulders. "I knew I could count on you, Mom. I am sending you the link so you can pay it." I replied, "Yes, honey." But inside me, that word felt like a betrayal to myself. I closed my eyes and saw myself from the outside, a strong woman reduced to an automated teller machine, and the rage began to mix with the sadness. When I hung up, I stayed with the cell phone in my hand, still warm from the call. It hurt to think that instead of a happy birthday, I had received a price list. I walked through the living room again and again like a caged lion. Is that what I am to her? I asked the air without expecting an answer. The silence answered me with cruelty. I turned on the television to distract myself, but everything sounded distant. Not even the noise filled that hole, and I found myself missing even a scolding from my mother, who is no longer here. The afternoon was heavy, as if every hour stretched more than normal. I opened the link Valerie had sent me and saw the photos of the hotel white sheets, blue sea glasses toasting. I closed the page quickly because I felt I was looking at something that was not mine. I could also give myself a trip like that, I thought. Why did I never consider it? It was always my daughter first, then me. And now apparently I did not even figure on her list of priorities. The wine in the glass tasted more bitter to me than before, and an internal voice told me, "This cannot go on like this." I found myself thinking about everything I had given, car studies, moves, emergencies, every time, without hesitating, because that is what being a mother is about. But at what moment did it become an obligation? At what moment did it stop being gratitude and become a demand? It burned me to accept that on that special day, mine she had not had even a minute for me. I asked myself if it was my fault for having accustomed her so much for never having set boundaries. And that word boundaries started spinning like an echo in my head. Night fell, and with it the certainty that Valerie would not call me again that day. Not a message with balloons, not a photo, nothing. The birthday had passed like any boring Tuesday. I went to bed with the cell phone on the nightstand, still waiting for a notification that did not arrive. The room smelled of flowers, but I felt withered. I closed my eyes and heard my mother's voice. Affection is shown with acts, not with empty words. I fell asleep with a knot in my stomach, a mixture of love, anger, and disappointment, and with a seed inside that was starting to wake up. The next day, Valerie wrote to me again about the hotel as if nothing had happened. I replied with monosyllables, measuring every letter. She did not notice my coldness or did not want to notice it. "We will solve it." "Right," she told me. I put the cell phone in the drawer and let it ring without opening it. It was not rebellion, it was exhaustion, and I discovered myself wanting something new. Silence but of peace, not of oblivion. A silence that was starting to be mine, not imposed. On the table, fresh sunflowers still remained, and I looked at them for a long time. They were witnesses of my own awakening. Maybe I did not yet have the courage to say everything I thought, but the seed of that boundary was growing. I could no longer ignore the injustice disguised as habit. It hurt me, yes, but it also gave me strength. I knew that that unexpected call had opened a wound, but also a door. And behind that door was a different woman that I was about to meet. I spent that whole day with a question stuck in my chest. What do I do? The easy answer was to say yes and transfer the money like always. But deep down, I knew that every yes of mine was costing me a piece of dignity. It was not about me not being able to, because I can thank God. It was about how she asked me for it as if it were my obligation and not a gesture of love. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw myself with the usual smile, the one that hides what I feel. That smile that so many times saved me from arguments. But now I was starting to get tired even of my own reflection. I made myself some tea to calm the anxiety, but not even the flavor would go down. I looked at the cup as if in it I could read the answers I could not find. Should I keep remaining silent? Should I keep giving? I asked myself in a low voice. I remembered when Valerie was a child and asked me for things with those little eyes of tenderness, how I ran to give her what I could, even if I did not have enough. That memory hurt me because it made me feel guilty for doubting now. But I also asked myself, does she remember those sacrifices, or does she only remember that whenever she asks, she receives in my heart? Two voices fought. One said, "She is your daughter. Do not be hard, help her." The other screamed, "Enough already. You are not her bank, you are her mother." That inner war wore me down more than any economic problem, because money is earned, is spent, is recovered. But the lack of respect that is not easily replaced. I felt that if I gave in again, I would end up erasing myself completely. And I did not want to turn into a shadow in my own house. I sat in the living room and reviewed my life as if looking in the past for the strength to decide. I remembered when I was widowed and promised myself that nothing would break me. I remembered the times they told me that alone I could not do it and how I got ahead. I have been strong, I repeated to myself. I have been capable of sustaining myself and sustaining her. So why now do I feel so weak in front of a call? Maybe because I did not expect the wound to come from her. From strangers, one protects oneself. From children, no. That is the trap of a mother's heart. Valerie called me again that afternoon, insistent as if no other subject existed than the trip. Her voice sounded tender, but it had no space for me, only for the urgency. She asked me to trust her that it was just one last favor. I laughed on the inside. Last I have heard that so many times. My throat wanted to scream what I felt, but habit tied me down. "Let me think about it," I repeated to gain time. She sighed, annoyed, as if my doubt were a treason, and she hung up in a hurry, leaving me a bigger emptiness than before. I stayed looking at the black screen of the cell phone, which reflected my tired face. I thought, what kind of mother am I if it hurts me to help her? And immediately I answered myself, a mother who is also a person. Because they always taught us that mothers must give without measure, that being silent and enduring is part of love. But I was no longer so sure that that was true love. True love, I believe, should have gratitude, and that ingredient I have not tasted from my daughter for a long time. That night, I almost did not sleep, turning the same dilemma over and over. I would open my eyes in the dark and see the shadows on the wall. I felt like those shadows present but invisible. I wondered if Valerie knew what she was causing in me, or if she simply saw it as something normal because I allowed it always. In my chest, there was a mixture of anger and tenderness that confused me. I loved her, of course I did, but it also hurt. And love, when it hurts so much, stops being love, it becomes a burden. At dawn, I decided to write in my notebook what I felt as if it were a letter. "I am not a credit card, I am your mother," I put, and seeing it, tears fell. Writing it made me realize how clear it was inside me. It was not the first time she asked me for money, but the first time I felt it as abuse, and that marked a huge difference. It was as if suddenly I opened my eyes after years of walking in the dark. The ink stained on the paper showed me my own truth, a truth that I could not keep denying. I saw myself tempted to erase what I wrote as if leaving it on paper were too strong. But then I thought that maybe that paper was the beginning of my freedom, that finally I was learning to name what was happening to me. I put the notebook in a drawer, trembling a little, because I knew that sooner or later I would have to talk to her. And that conversation was not going to be easy. The dilemma was no longer just whether to give her the money or not. The dilemma was if I was willing to recover my voice. While I had breakfast alone, the question kept circling me. What hurts me more, telling her no or continuing to say yes? Because either of the two answers would bring consequences. If I said no, she could distance herself, get angry, judge me. If I said yes, I would continue feeding the injustice. I bit my lip as if looking for strength. The coffee tasted bitter to me, even if I put sugar in it. And I knew that sooner or later I was going to have to choose between her and me. The house was quiet, but inside me there was a storm. The dilemma accompanied me at every step like a stuck shadow. I wanted to distract myself, cleaning, sweeping, dusting. But even the dust spoke to me of the decision I did not want to take. The phone rang from time to time, and I looked at it with fear and hope. Every ring was a reminder of my silence, an internal battle that no one saw but that was splitting me in two. And I knew I could not sustain it for much longer. When I think of Valerie, I cannot avoid remembering everything I lived to see her happy. I do not exaggerate when I say that I worked day and night so she would not lack anything. I remember those early mornings when I left with eyes swollen from sleep. While she slept in her little princess bed, I was cleaning offices to earn extra. The cold of the streets was my companion, but I smiled, imagining her smiling little face. That memory fills me with tenderness, but also with sadness now, because I feel that all that effort today weighs only in my memory. She seems to have erased it from hers. When Valerie turned 15, I had no idea how I was going to pay for the party. I sold a couple of jewels inherited from my mother, the only ones I had. They were more than gold, they were memories, they were roots. But I did it without thinking, because my daughter deserved to feel like a queen that day. And I watched her dance her waltz with a radiant smile while I hid my tears. Tears of pride, yes, but also of exhaustion. I thought it was worth it. Today I ask myself if she remembers it with the same love as I do. It also comes to mind when she entered college. The money was not enough, but I managed to cover everything. I accepted double shifts. I stopped buying myself new clothes for years. I did not want her to feel shame in front of her classmates. I remember how I ran from one job to another, eating standing up without rest. And even so, upon arriving home, I smiled, seeing her study. That sacrifice seemed sweet to me then. Today it seems like a debt that she never recognized. When she wanted her first car, she told me it was necessary for her degree, and I, without thinking, financed it with my savings. It was money saved for my old age, but I preferred to give it to her. The hope in her face was my payment at that moment, and I repeated to myself, someday she will thank me with deeds, not with words. That someday still does not arrive. Sometimes I think I confuse love with obligation, and that she learned that wrong lesson from me. I also remember when I had a nervous breakdown a few years ago. The doctor told me I had to slow down, that my body could not take it anymore. But how to stop if Valerie still needed me? I kept going, swallowing pills and herbal tea. Exhaustion was my shadow, but I hid it behind smiles. I did not want her to see me weak. I preferred her to think her mother was made of iron, even though inside I was breaking. I think about the amount of times I gave up my own dreams. There was always a bigger priority. Her school, her trips, her cravings. I wanted to see other countries, stroll without rushing, learn new things. but every dollar ended up in her hands. I do not regret it because I did it with love. What hurts is that she does not seem to see it now, as if all that were normal, as if she deserved it just because. And I, in silence, fed that habit. There was a time when I thought she admired me. She told me as a child, "My mom is the strongest." That phrase was my fuel when I could not go on anymore. But now I feel that that strength turned into something against me. Because the stronger she saw me, the more she demanded of me, as if I did not have the right to get tired ever, as if I did not need a little care too. And that weighs on me more than any bill. I remember the graduation dress she wanted so much. I did not have enough and had to borrow from a friend. I felt ashamed, but I did not doubt it. That day, I saw her enter the hall with her head held high, sure of herself, and I felt fulfilled, although my shoes were broken. People congratulated me for my daughter. Nobody saw my hidden sacrifices. I smiled proud, but inside, I asked myself until when. Now I know that I never answered that until when for myself. I also remember the small moments, the most intimate ones, like when I brought her hot cocoa after a difficult exam, or when I knitted sweaters for her on cold nights. They were simple gestures but full of love, gestures that did not cost so much money, but yes, time and heart. I asked myself if those details remained stored in some corner of her memory, or if they were erased by the rush of adult life. I keep keeping them like invisible treasures. Every memory hurts me and makes me proud at the same time. It hurts me because I feel she does not value them. It makes me proud because I know I was capable of getting up always. I am conscious of everything I gave, and that makes me strong. But it also makes me vulnerable because I did not receive the same. It is a void that no bank account can fill, and that no trip to the Caribbean can justify. Love is measured in gratitude, and that currency is missing for me. Sometimes I think about how different it would have been if I had set boundaries from the beginning, if I had taught her that love is not measured in things, but in respect. Maybe we would not be in this situation now. Maybe she would see me with other eyes. But I can no longer turn back time. The only thing I can do is learn from my own mistakes and decide that I will not continue in the same circle, because my story can still change. When I close my eyes, I see my mother again, her worn hands, her firm eyes, her clear voice. She did know how to say no when it was necessary. She taught me with deeds that dignity is worth more than any gift. I did not follow her example, and today I am paying for it. But I am still in time. I repeat it to myself every day. I am not a defeated old woman. I am a living, conscious woman, and I have the right to choose another form of loving. Valerie came to see me a few days later with the same rush as always. She entered the house talking about the heat, the traffic, about how much she had to do. She was carrying her cell phone in her hand, her eyes on the screen, and a huge bag hanging from her shoulder. I observed her waiting for at least a hug, a small gesture. I approached with open arms, but she barely gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Did you see the hotel thing, Mom?" That was the first thing she said without looking me in the eyes. My heart shrank because she did not even mention my past birthday. I felt the air in the living room became colder than ever. I had prepared coffee and cookies as always when she came. I wanted her to sit down for us to talk about us, not just about expenses. But Valerie arranged her things on the table and opened her laptop. She showed me photos, numbers, budgets, as if I were just another executive. I sat in silence, feeling like a spectator in my own house. "It is a unique opportunity, Mom. We cannot let it pass," she insisted. Her excitement wasn't about seeing me. It was about closing a deal. And I felt like the mandatory signature on an invisible contract. I tried to tell her something about my birthday, about how much I had looked forward to it. My voice came out quiet, trembling. "Honey, that day it hurt me that, no." She interrupted me with a hand gesture without looking up from the screen. Yeah, Mom, I know, sorry, it is just that I was super busy, you understand. That phrase went through me like a knife because it was not an apology. It was an excuse. And I was tired of excuses. The coffee in my mug was getting cold, just like my patience. Valerie kept talking about dates, flights, itineraries. Her voice sounded happy, almost childish, like when she dreamed as a little girl. That broke my soul, seeing that the emotion I was looking for in her, she was now giving to material things. "So you are going to help me write. I need you to confirm right now," she said at last. I looked at her in silence, trying to find in her face a trace of the daughter I raised. I saw a grown woman, but still leaning on me as if she were 10 years old. And I asked myself, who failed? Was it her for asking, or me for never setting limits? The pain was drowning me, but I still could not tell her what I was thinking. The conversation became a monologue on her part. I barely responded with, yes, I understand. Inside, I was screaming with frustration. I wanted to slam the table and tell her, "Look at me, I am your mother, not your ATM." But my mouth was sealed by years of habit. And my silence, instead of being a protest, seemed like approval. Valerie did not notice my dull expression. Or maybe she noticed, but she did not care. "I swear this is going to be the last expense, Mom," she told me in a sugary tone. That phrase sounded like a repetition to me, like a promise broken so many times before. I listened to her with a shrinking heart, knowing it was not true. Because there was always something else, there would always be another emergency. I wanted to ask her when she was going to give something to me, but the words did not come out because I was afraid of losing her. That fear had me chained. More than the money, I was tied to her conditional affection. Suddenly, she got up to answer a call and left me talking to myself. I looked at the table, the untouched coffee, the stale cookies, the open laptop. It was as if my home had turned into an office, as if my motherhood had been reduced to numbers and transfers. I stood up slowly, went to the window, and took a deep breath. I felt the fresh air giving me back a little clarity. I saw people passing by outside with their own problems and wondered if anyone else was living the same thing as me. When she sat back down, she took my hand like she did as a little girl. "I trust you, Mom. You always save me," she said with calculated tenderness. That gesture, which used to fill me with pride, now tore me apart because I understood that it was not pure love, it was disguised dependency, and I was already tired of always saving her. I felt my eyes filling with tears, but I did not let them fall. I did not want to show myself as weak in front of her, although inside I was breaking in two. I tried to change the subject to ask her about her life, about how she was doing. She responded with short sentences like someone rushing through paperwork and then returned to the topic of the trip again. I realized there was no space for me in that conversation. Not for my feelings, not for my birthday, not for my loneliness, only for her plans. It was as if I were just another step on the staircase toward her happiness, and that discovery left me frozen. When saying goodbye, she gave me a quick hug and said, "Don't worry, I will let you know." She did not even look me in the eyes. She left with the same hurry with which she had entered, leaving behind her scent of expensive perfume. I stayed alone in the living room with the cold coffee and the untouched cookies. I closed the door slowly, as if the noise could break me more. I leaned my back against the wood and breathed deeply. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that something inside of me was about to explode. I could not keep staying silent anymore. After that visit from Valerie, I thought at least I would have a break. But no. The week was just beginning and the phone rang again. This time, it was my sister, asking me to help her with a temporary loan. She said she would pay me back soon, like always. I listened to her words and felt they were an echo of the same thing I had heard 1,000 times. "Only you can support me," she insisted, and I, with my soft heart, did not know how to tell her that I was already tired, not only of giving money, but of feeling used. I hung up that call and was barely breathing calmly when it rang again. It was my nephew asking me to support him with his back rent. He spoke to me with that good auntie tone, knowing that I almost never say no. I promised him I would think about it, but my stomach was churning with helplessness. I realized that my generosity had become a sentence. Instead of gratitude, I received demands. Instead of affection, I received bills to pay. And every favor was one more chain around my neck. That afternoon, I sat at the table with my budget notebook. I wrote down all the loans, help, and favors I had given in the last few months. The list seemed endless, longer than I imagined. Cold numbers that told a story of abuse disguised as affection. I looked at the final sum and felt dizzy. It was not that I lacked money. Thank God I remained stable. It was that I lacked peace. And I understood that the true debt was emotional. I started to ask myself, what do all of them have in common? And the answer hit me hard. They know I do not know how to say no. That has been my biggest mistake. I confused love with eternal availability. I taught them to see me as the easy solution to all their problems, while I stayed with mine, kept in silence. Suddenly, I felt rage, but not toward them, but toward myself for allowing it for so long. That night, while eating dinner alone, I remembered something that hurt me more. The favors never stayed just at money. They also asked me for time, attention, care. And when I needed company, the house was empty. Nobody called me to ask how I was, only to ask how much I could give them. That truth burned me like hot coals. It made me realize that it was not a forgotten birthday. No, it was a whole forgotten life, and that I had erased myself by always putting them in first place. The next day, Valerie insisted on the hotel again. Her voice sounded anxious, as if the world would end if I did not make the transfer. I breathed deeply, trying not to give in immediately. "Let me organize my things, honey. I cannot decide so fast," I told her. She sighed loudly like a spoiled brat. "You are always busy when I need you," she complained. That phrase went through me like a poisoned dart because it was exactly the other way around. I was always available for her. I stayed there thinking about how I had reached this point. At what moment did I let the habit of giving turn into an obligation? I remembered that as a young woman, I promised myself I would never depend on anyone. And yet now, they were the ones depending on me. I, who had worked so hard for my independence, was a prisoner of their needs, and the price of my silence was too high. That idea started to give me strength. For the first time in years, I thought I have the right to stop this. While I was washing the dishes, I discovered myself talking alone. What would happen if I tell them no? The echo in the kitchen sounded strange to me, as if I did not recognize my own voice. I had never dared to pronounce that simple word. No. It was short, hard, definitive. But I was afraid that by saying it, I would end up alone. That fear was what had me trapped. That night, I dreamed of my mother. I saw her standing there with her apron and her firm gaze. She told me, "Helen, love is not shown by giving everything. Love is shown by teaching others to value you." I woke up sweating with tears in my eyes, but also with a clarity I had not felt in years. My mother was right, she always was, and I, at 63 years old, could still learn that lesson. I got up more determined than ever. I prepared coffee and sat down to think about what I was going to say. I could not keep allowing every call to be a bill. I had to recover my voice even if it trembled, because I was fed up with being the strong woman only for others. I wanted to be strong for myself too, and I knew that the moment to set that limit was going to arrive soon. There was no turning back. The phone rang again at noon. This time, I did not answer it immediately. I watched it vibrate on the table as if it were a test. My heart was beating fast, but I did not touch it. I let it ring and ring until it went silent, and for the first time, I felt relief, not guilt. That silence tasted like freedom, and I understood that the favor that never ends was only going to end when I said enough. The breakthrough didn't come with shouting. It came in silence. I realized it upon waking up without fear of her next call. The exhaustion was no longer a fog, it was clarity. I don't want to keep living with guilt as my alarm clock. I am a mother, yes, but I am also a woman. I have the right to take care of myself without asking for permission. That thought frightened me and embraced me at the same time. I knew that something in me would never bow down again. I looked at myself in the mirror with patience, not judgment. I saw wrinkles that tell stories and eyes that still shine. I told myself my full name to truly hear myself. Helen, you deserve respect. I repeated it until I believed it. I put my hands on my chest to feel my pulse. I wasn't weak. I was tired of pretending. Strength is not enduring. It is deciding. That day, I began to decide for myself. I opened my notebook and drew 2 columns, yes and no. In the yes column, I wrote down everything I gave away without measure. In the no column, I wrote what I forbade myself, saying no to resting, no to asking no to crying. The no column hurt more than the bank account. I understood that the abuse had started with me. I left myself for last like market leftovers. That inventory was my first intimate complaint. I closed my eyes and spoke with my mother's voice. She told me clearly, limitless love wears out. You are not betraying your daughter. You are rescuing yourself. If you don't respect yourself, they won't respect you. I felt her firm hand on my back without reproach. She didn't ask for heroism. She asked for coherence. Coherence hurts at first like a thorn. Then it becomes a pillar to hold up the house. I rehearsed in front of the mirror the phrase I never said. Honey, this time I am not going to pay for your honeymoon. Just reading it on my lips cut off my air. I feared she would get angry that she would stop talking to me. I feared being left alone on my next birthday. But I also feared being left alone with myself for giving in. The loneliness from saying no hurts differently than the loneliness from surrendering. I chose the one that keeps me whole. The cell phone vibrated, and I saw her name lighting up the screen. I didn't answer on the first attempt. I breathed, counting to 10. It rang again, and I kept breathing. I discovered the world didn't fall apart for waiting. The anxiety deflated like an old balloon. I controlled the rhythm, not anyone's urgency. I answered when my voice was steady. That was already a change. I opened the banking app and looked at my numbers without guilt. The balance was fine, but my peace was priceless. I thought about a new budget limits included. If I give support, it will be with conditions and clear dates. If not, it will be no, without stories or eternal explanations. I put my card away like someone guarding a talisman. The tool is mine, not others. I felt the pleasant weight of autonomy again. I wrote a letter to Valerie that perhaps I would never send. I told her how I felt on my birthday. I explained that helping is not paying for her silence, that I want presence, not urgencies with a discount. I told her that I love her, but that I love myself too. Each line removed a knot from my stomach. I ended with a phrase that sustained me until here. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer of serious things. I made a list of new rules, simple and human. No loans without a date or amount in writing. No urgent favors on the day of my important dates. Any support will be proportional and temporary. I will not accept guilt that doesn't belong to me. Respect will be the first requirement of any conversation. If there is blackmail, the call ends. If there is gratitude, the doors open again. I reorganized the house as if it were my head. I took out old boxes and let the light into sleeping corners. I put sunflowers in the center like a flag. I threw away receipts that held ancient anxieties. Each bag in the trash was one piece of guilt less. I made myself a cinnamon tea and toasted with my reflection. "Welcome back, Helen who chooses herself," I murmured. The house sounded different, as if it breathed with me. I practiced my voice saying no in different tones. "No, honey." "I can't, honey." "Not today, honey." I called Linda to tell her, and she listened without judgment. She told me I wasn't crazy, that I was brave. She offered to accompany me when the storm arrived. I accepted because bravery also knows how to ask for support. I don't want to fight. I want to create order. I repeated that like a pocket prayer. At night, the doorbell rang and my heart jumped. I looked through the peephole and saw Valerie with a furrowed brow. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and left the fear outside. She had her phone in her hand, ready to talk about payments. I had my folded letter and my voice in its place. The breakthrough had already happened inside. Now it was time for the outside. I knew the conversation would change our history. And even trembling, I felt prepared to start the fight. Valerie sat in front of me with that hurry that characterizes her. She took out her cell phone and started showing me numbers and dates. I looked at her, but this time my eyes were not distracted. I felt that something inside me was stronger than fear. It wasn't rage, it was clarity. My heart was pounding in my chest, but my voice wanted to come out. "Valerie," I said slowly, and she looked up surprised. "Today we are not going to talk about hotels or promotions." She remained silent, frowning, waiting. I breathed deeply, searching inside myself for the strength of my mother and all the women before me. "I want you to listen to me," I added with a tone I rarely used with her. I felt the words weighed like stones, but they were necessary. For the first time, I didn't tremble looking her straight in the eye. I saw the reflection of her surprise, even discomfort. I knew there was no turning back. The decision was made. "I love you, honey, but this time I'm not going to pay for your honeymoon." The phrase fell between us like unexpected thunder. The subsequent silence was louder than any scream. She opened her eyes, incredulous, as if she hadn't understood well. "Mom, what do you mean, no? You always support me," she exclaimed. I nodded slowly but without lowering my gaze. "Yes, I always did, but not anymore." And my voice sounded so firm that even I was surprised. Valerie tried to laugh nervously, believing it was a joke. "Mom, please don't play with that. The offer ends today," she insisted. But I didn't smile, I didn't hesitate. I remained silent for a few seconds that seemed eternal. That silence was my shield. She started moving her hands impatiently, a gesture of hers from when she was a spoiled little girl. "I need you to do it now, don't you understand?" she shouted, and I found myself calm in front of her storm. "I understand perfectly," I replied serenely. "I understand that you always ask me and never give me presents. I understand that on my birthday you didn't have time even for a hug, and I understand that today again you only think about your things." My voice didn't come out with rage. It came out with pained calm. That calm that cuts deeper than anger. She lowered her gaze for a moment, nervous. For the first time, I noticed she had no answer. My heart was beating like a drum, but I didn't back down. I took her hand soft but firm. "I am not your ATM, Valerie. I am your mother, and I want respect, not bills." She pulled her hand away as if it burned. The gesture hurt me, but I didn't regret it. It was the first time I set a clear limit, and I felt that line gave me back my lost dignity. Valerie started to cry, but I don't know if out of anger or helplessness. "So you are going to leave me alone in this?" she claimed. I took a deep breath, letting her tears not manipulate me. "I am not leaving you alone. I am teaching you to walk." That phrase came out of my mouth almost without thinking, but saying it, I understood it was true. I had raised a dependent daughter, and now I had to let her go. For love of her, but also for love of me. Her crying tore me apart, but I remained firm. The temptation to give in was there like sweet poison, but I remembered all the times I swallowed my pain in silence. I remembered my birthday, my untouched cake, my loneliness, and I understood that if I gave in again, nothing would ever change. I embraced that certainty like a castaway to a plank. "This is my decision," I repeated softly, and I felt a strange relief as if I dropped a huge weight. Valerie stood up, gathering her things with rage. "I can't believe it, Mom." "You disappoint me," she said with a hard voice. That word disappointment went through me like a knife, but I didn't let it show on my face. I limited myself to saying, "Someday you will understand." She huff-turned and left, slamming the door. The echo rumbled in the house, but I remained standing, and my soul, for the first time in years, didn't shrink. When the door closed, I stayed alone, but not defeated. The silence of the living room was no longer empty. It was gained space. I poured myself a glass of wine. My hands were still trembling. But this time it wasn't from fear, it was from bravery. I toasted with myself like someone inaugurating a new stage. The house smelled of freedom, although also of grief. I knew that decision would cost me tears, but it would also save my soul. I turned off the lights and lay down on the armchair. The tears came at last, but they weren't of defeat. They were of cleansing, of relief, of healing. I felt alive, more alive than ever. I thought about my mother, about how she would be proud of me. I thought about the Helen of a few months ago, unable to say no. And I hugged myself tight as if protecting myself. The brave decision was already made, and I wouldn't regret it. The following days were a whirlwind of missed calls and cold messages. Valerie wrote me short phrases loaded with reproach. "I thought I could trust you. You failed me. I didn't expect this from you." Each word was like a poisoned dart straight to my chest. I read them in silence with held-back tears, but without responding. Not because I didn't want to, but because I feared falling into the trap of guilt. I knew one yes was enough to nullify all my effort, and I wasn't willing to surrender now. Finally, one Saturday afternoon, Valerie appeared at my door. She knocked hard, persistently, like someone demanding answers. When I opened, her face was hardened by anger. "We need to talk, Mom," she said, entering without waiting for my permission. I breathed deeply, ready to face the inevitable. My heart was beating strongly, but calm sustained me. I was no longer the same fearful woman as before. This time, the one who was going to speak was me. "How could you do this to me?" she threw out as soon as she sat down. "You have always supported me, and just now you decide to leave me alone." Her words were daggers, but I didn't blink. "Valerie," I replied with a firm voice. "I didn't leave you alone, I just set a limit." She laughed sarcastically. "Limit you or my mom, you should be there for me always." The phrase hurt, but it didn't break me. "I am your mom, yes, but I am also a person." I answered her, and my own words gave me strength. The atmosphere tensed up. It could be cut with a knife. Valerie crossed her arms, defiant, waiting for me to give in, but I didn't. "I love you, honey, but I am not going to keep financing your life," I declared. She hit the table with her hand, furious. "You have no idea what you are causing me." I looked at her with serenity and replied, "Yes, I know. What I am causing you is independence." Valerie looked at me incredulously, as if she didn't recognize me. "You were always my refuge, and now you close the door on me." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a second I saw the little girl I had raised. But that tenderness didn't cloud my mind like before. I took her hand gently and told her, "I am not closing the door on you, honey. I am teaching you to knock on it with respect." She pulled her hand away abruptly. That gesture was another stab, but I remained firm. And what if it goes wrong? What if I fail? She asked me with rage mixed with fear. I felt a knot in my throat, but I answered calmly, "Then you will learn, just like I learned. Nobody rescued me, honey, and here I am." My eyes were shining, not with pride, but with truth. Valerie lowered her gaze for the first time in the whole discussion. That silence of hers was a small triumph for me because at last she was listening and I didn't plan to back down. She tried to turn the discussion toward guilt. "Is this how you pay me back for everything I did for you?" she threw suddenly. I felt a burning in my chest, but I didn't fall into the trap. "Everything you did for me was living as my daughter and me as your mother. Love is not charged. Valerie, it is honored." My words sounded firm, almost like a sentence. She opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. Silence occupied the living room again. I took advantage of that instant to open my heart to her. It hurt me that on my birthday you didn't remember me. That day I didn't want gifts, nor trips, nor money. I just wanted a hug, a call with affection. And instead of that, I received a bill disguised as a favor. Valerie looked at me with red eyes, surprised by my frankness. I had never spoken to her like that before. That moment marked a before and after. She started to cry, but not with tears of manipulation. It was a deep cry, almost childish, as if something in her broke. "Mom, I didn't think it hurt you so much," she murmured. I listened to her in silence with my heart in my hand. "Of course it hurts, honey, because you are my greatest love," I replied. The silence that followed wasn't of reproach, but of naked truth. For the first time, I felt my words had entered her heart, although the road would still be long. Valerie wanted to justify herself, talk about her problems, about her stress. I listened to her, but I didn't give in. It doesn't matter how busy you are, there is always time for an "I love you." That costs nothing, honey, and means everything. She covered her face with her hands, ashamed. I observed her in silence without rushing to fill the voids. It was she who now had to face her own truths, and I was only going to accompany her, not rescue her. The conversation ended without hugs, without full reconciliation. She left with heavy steps without looking back. The door closed and left me in the middle of a thick silence. I remained standing, trembling, with tears rolling down at last. They weren't tears of defeat, they were of liberation. I had faced my daughter without fear, with dignity. And although it hurt, I knew it was the beginning of a change. In her and above all in me. The house remained silent after that confrontation, but it was no longer a silence that weighed on me. It was a silence that held me. For the first time in a long time, I felt light, as if I had taken a sack off my back. I lit a candle and let the wax fall, slowly marking a new beginning. I poured myself a glass of wine and toasted with myself without guilt. That toast was a different celebration, intimate and powerful. I wasn't celebrating being alone. I was celebrating being with me, and I discovered that was also a gift. The following days were weird, a mix of pain and relief. Pain for Valerie's words, for the tears that split us. But relief because at last I had set a limit that gave me back respect. I got up early, opened the windows, and let the fresh air enter. The house seemed different, as if it breathed with me. The walls were no longer witnesses of my resignation, but of my awakening. I surprised myself singing while cooking. It was as if freedom had given me back my voice. I decided to do something I always postponed: travel alone. I looked for a simple destination, a place I always wanted to go to but never dared. I booked a hotel with my own savings without asking anyone for permission. I prepared my suitcase, calmly folding every garment with excitement. I felt nervous, of course, but also an emotion I hadn't felt in years. It was as if the little girl I had buried in me came back to play. While closing the suitcase, I told myself, "Now, yes, Helen, you live for yourself." And that phrase filled me with pride. The trip was a revelation. Waking up in a new place, walking through unknown streets, breathing freedom. I sat in the squares to watch life pass by without hurry. I ate what I craved, tasted different flavors. I discovered myself smiling at strangers, feeling part of the world again. Nobody asked me for anything. Nobody expected anything. Just me with myself, deciding every step. It was a peace I didn't remember feeling. In the middle of that trip, I reflected on my life. I don't regret what I gave because I did it with sincere love. But I understood that loving also means setting limits. That not saying no isn't abandonment, it is teaching. That the true inheritance I can leave my daughter is not money but dignity. And that I am still in time to show her with facts that another form of love is possible. I embraced that truth like a shield. It was my new way of walking the world. Upon returning home, everything seemed more luminous to me. I put fresh flowers in the dining room this time for me. I bought a small cake and cut it without waiting for visitors. I turned on music and danced alone in the living room, laughing at myself. That laughter was a prize, an invisible medal. I didn't need witnesses to validate my happiness, because freedom isn't shouted, it is lived, and I was learning to live it. With Valerie, the relationship didn't change from one day to the next. She remained distant with wounded pride, but I no longer ran after her. I no longer lowered myself for a message. When she called me, I listened to her calmly without giving in to blackmail. If she asked, I decided with freedom whether to help or not. That power of decision was my silent victory. And although it hurt to see the coldness, I repeated to myself, "No more chains." It was a different pain, a consented pain. One afternoon, Valerie called me to ask for advice, not money. That gesture surprised me and moved me. We didn't talk about bills, we talked about feelings. For the first time in a long time, I felt she saw me as a mother, not as a resource. I listened to her without reproaches, with patience, and although it was a brief chat for me, it meant a lot. It was proof that my decision was bearing fruit, that respect starts in oneself and then blooms in others. Recovering my freedom also changed me as a woman. I fixed myself up for me. I bought myself flowers. I gave myself quiet afternoons. I stopped carrying guilt that wasn't mine. And I started to feel pride in every wrinkle and every scar. They weren't marks of defeat. They were medals of resistance. Every day I chose myself was a victory, and I understood that at my 63 years I can still reinvent myself. I can still be happy, dignified, and free. Looking back, I see everything I endured in silence. The hidden tears, the nights of anguish, the abuses disguised as affection. And I hug myself for having had the courage to break that cycle. It wasn't easy. Nothing is when it comes to family. But I learned that being a mother doesn't mean canceling yourself, that a woman also deserves respect even if her children don't understand it at first, and that the true strength is in raising your voice when everyone expects your silence. That is the inheritance I want to leave. Today I celebrate my days in another way. I don't wait for calls to feel loved. I don't wait for favors in exchange for love. I celebrate with flowers, with music, with hot coffee. I celebrate with my own company, which I learned to value. Loneliness no longer weighs on me. It sustains me. Because I discovered that I was never alone. I always had me. And that is the greatest freedom of all. Tell me in the comments what you thought of this story. What part touched your heart the most, and from what part of the world are you joining us? I would love to read your thoughts. Because every experience unites us and reminds us that we are not alone on this path. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the next stories full of emotion, surprises, and life lessons. Here you will always find tales that inspire strength, dignity, and hope.